Hey, friend, it's great to be with you on this episode of the Church Tips Podcast. And today I'm with my good friend from the great state of Colorado, Gene Roncone. Gene, say hi to the viewers today.
Man, great to be with you and everyone on your podcast.
Well, we've really enjoyed, Gene, as you would guess, communicating with pastors on the issues that are germane to them in the pastorate and in the ministry today. And you and I were going back and forth over the last week or so on something that you're finding as a leader. Now, this is a multi-denominational podcast. Gene happens to serve in a fellowship where you have how many churches in the Rocky Mountain District?
We've got just under 170 churches and 550 ministers and 44,000 constituents in Colorado and Utah.
Yeah. So what are you doing in your spare time? That's what I want to know.
Yeah.
We wanted to know that because for the viewers, Gene's comments are very, very credible in my mind because he's boots on the ground dealing with pastors who are dealing with the subject we're going to talk about here of isolation in ministry. And it's real, and it's an issue that we need to be very open and honest about if we're going to move forward and address it effectively. So, Gene, talk to us.
Yeah, I really feel the ground moving beneath me, Dick. It is, there's something happening in the church right now, and it is not good. It's like shifting tectonic plates. Pastors are crashing, they're burning out at alarming rates. Let me give you a couple examples of how this has been documented. Lifeway research said that 1 in 4 pastors struggle with depression and anxiety. Chuck Hannaford, he is the psychological counsel for the Southern Baptist Convention. He was recently interviewed about the uptick of ministerial suicide. And he said he just doesn't see those numbers leveling out. He thinks that they're going to continue to increase. Another study said 64% of pastors have less than 5 close friends, if you can believe that. That just kind of blows my mind. Barna research said 100 or 1,500 clergy leave the ministry every month. And here's the staggering one, Dick. 50% of pastors indicated that they would leave the ministry if they had another way to make a living and provide for their family. That was from the Hartford Institute of Religious Research.
Wow.
And so, it really doesn't take you long to dig down underneath all these symptoms that we're talking about, burnout, loneliness, moral failure, that you see the real problem, and that is isolation. So for various reasons, a lot of ministers are allowing themselves to be separated from those life-giving relationships. And I personally believe the most healthy relationships a pastor can have is with other pastors. So from my line of sight, I see from my view, kind of at the top of the mass, giving leadership to 2 states, I see 5 reasons why pastors must get out of isolation and start connecting with life-giving relationships with their peers.
Yep. Well, when you talk about even the thing that captured, I caught all of it, but this thing that jumped out at me was they don't have, a lot of pastors don't have 5 close friends.
Mm-hmm.
And I can imagine even those who do have 5 close friends, if this becomes chronic over a lengthy period of time, the guys would get in the mode of thinking, I really have 0 close friends because they've already talked to this one and that one and that one and that one. Yes. And then they talk to them again and again and again and again. And they're kind of going to themselves, there's something wrong with me because I've talked to my friends and I'm still like this.
Yes. Yeah. And I think the thing that is scary about this is that many pastors lock the door from the inside. And so one of the great dangers is that isolated ministers are susceptible to tremendous temptation, more so than others. I mean, you and I know this, Dick. Ministry is going to find your weakness, right? It's not if, it's when. And I love what Bonhoeffer said, that sin demands to have a man by himself, that they resist the temptation to live and serve in isolation. And boy, that is a powerful statement. So, God has created all of us for community. God in Genesis, our first image of him, is existing in community in the Trinity.
Right.
But when we deprive ourselves of those life-giving relationships with others, we are weaker, not stronger. And so we are susceptible to a lot of temptations that feed into that. So, isolated pastors have way more temptation, but they also are dangerous leaders, Dick. When you start isolating yourself and you don't have these kind of people, and the reason I'm a big fan of peer relationships is I can have immediate traction with another minister if I've even known him for 30 minutes. We have so much in common right out of the gate.
Right.
I can't always share with people in my church or people in the lay community, but boy, a peer understands what you do, how you do it, the pressures of it. And so when you isolate yourself, you become a dangerous leader. I love what Eric Geiger said. He said the sting of criticism burdens, responsibilities, and the pace of leadership constantly nudges us towards isolation. And every step, we become more and more dangerous. And so, you think about those crash and burn stories that all of us have in our head, and you really come to the conclusion that isolated leaders, they lack meaningful relationships. They don't have the support system, the accountability structures, the peer communication. And so with no authentic relationships or systems, their greatest gifts, no matter how great they are, sooner or later become overshadowed by their weakness. When I think about this, Dick, I think of Judas.
Yeah.
You read that passage in John where it says, at the Last Supper, the sacred moment, it says, as soon as Judas took the bread, Satan entered him. I'm scratching my head going, how does one of Jesus's inner circle become possessed by a demon? How does a man who experienced all the things that Jesus had,
miracles, healings, and everything.
Yeah, walking and calming the sea, casting out demons, and it's because Judas got on that road of isolation and he just couldn't get off of it.
Yeah. Wow. So talk to us about those 5 that you were referencing earlier.
Yeah. So we talked a little bit about the first 2, and that is that we're more susceptible to temptation when we're isolated.
Yep.
The second that we talked about was, we become dangerous. We become toxic leaders on ego trips, narcissistic. We just are not healthy. And the third thing, the reason is that I think isolated leaders are prone to destructive emotions. I spend some time researching a lot of these pastoral suicides, and Dick, I wish I could tell you a different fact, but in the last 6 years, 3 of my close friends took their lives in the ministry. And statistics showed that an isolated leader experiences more frequent and more intense feelings of things like sadness, loneliness, depression, anxiety, stress. And so pastoral suicide is becoming more and more common. And we read these things, we kind of roll on without looking at them. Family therapist Jim Hodkins says that a minister's close and authentic relationships can be preventative, and they can be an antidote to emotional wounds, mental illness, depression, and even some addictions. I mean, that's how powerful relationships and community are. So I think isolation takes us to a dark place, and sometimes we go there not realizing where isolation is taking us.
Yeah. Wow. Any others that really are identified?
Yeah, let me touch on 2 more. One is that isolated leaders are much more prone to pride. And Dick, it's hard for me to say what I'm about to say. I love pastors. I am an advocate for pastors. On the bottom of my email is not my title. It says helper. And it's hard for me to say this, but one of the most discouraging things about my role is to see the prevalence of pride and ego in our ministers. And Dick, I'm not talking about megachurch pastors. I'm saying ministers of all sizes of ministry, all scope of ministry. Yeah. And I think what happens is sometimes ministers isolate themselves. Most of the time, ministers get what they want. And I can't think of a greater recipe for disaster than to be isolated and get what you want most of the time. And so what happens is isolation manifests itself in things like competition with our peers, jealousy, narcissism, and pride keeps us from reaching out to others because it isolates us. We begin to elevate ourselves above our peers, and so that old Proverbs 16:18, just rings true too often. Pride goes before destruction. So when you see competition, arrogance, hyper spirituality, all these things are ways that isolated leaders try to elevate themselves above others instead of connecting with them in
Yeah.
relationship. Does that make sense?
That absolutely does make sense. I remember reading here just a couple of years ago, secular book, Ego is the Enemy.
Boy, yeah.
Oh, my goodness. And that just has church and pastoring written all over it. As you said, in churches of all size.
Yes.
And we're all susceptible, including Gene, including Dick, everybody. So
absolutely.
getting the grip, it's huge.
I'm convinced, Dick, that, when I pastored for 35 years, you don't always get what you want, but the things that were important to me, 90% of the time, I got what I want.
Right.
And I think that there are times, Dick, that God deprives me of very good and noble desires for no other reason to keep me humble and dependent upon Him.
Yeah.
And so, that leads to what I would call the next danger, and that is that isolated leaders, they're at a way higher risk for burnout. Barna research found that there is a direct correlation between the absence of friendships and the propensity towards spiritual and vocational burnout.
Yeah.
And that happens when we don't have friends. So, we are hardwired for community. We were created in the image of God, who is a relational creator. And so we are our best selves when we exist in community. We are our worst selves when we live in isolation. So, if there is a pastor that is here, and boy, I have been in every church model. And when I was younger, I served in a small rural church. Before going to district ministry, I served in a larger church. And I get all of that. But once you believe you don't need your peers, man, that is the beginning of the end as far as this isolation thing. So I think one of the saddest things, Dick, is a quote that I love from Rusty George in his book, Better Together. He said this: "The saddest truth is that we are the ones who lock the door from the inside." And boy, you can't help someone that's locked the door from the inside, can you?
No, you really can't do it. This has been so good, Gene. I'm gonna. I didn't tell you this, so we're just gonna wing it and see how this works. You got a guy who's watching this podcast right now, or a gal, and they're at the end. They're at the bottom. They recognize 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5. All 5 of the things you just talked about. They have cried out to God. They've screamed out to God.
Yeah.
To deliver me, to help me. And they can't find their way out. They may be contemplating the end.
Yes.
And they don't disagree with anything. They get help. Is there anything we can do to penetrate what seems to be the reason they've locked the door from the inside?
Yeah. Yes.
Intentionally or not, they've done this. What can we say to them? Is there, and I know I'm putting you on the spot with this.
I would love to respond to that. I think there's a couple of things that are important for pastors. One is Dick, this is the hardest time to lead. It is, outside of the Civil War years where many pastors buried half of their churches. I think this is the hardest time to lead. Lay people are impossible to please these days. No. So I think what is healthy is reaching out. So I had a great mentor in my life who taught me many years ago. Ministry is so demanding. Every 5 years, you should go to a counselor and get an emotional checkup. Now, Dick, this was before, that it was hip to go see or get help, right? Back in the day, it was cool. Frowned upon.
Right,
and I'm talking about a Christian counselor.
right.
Every 5 years, I go to a counselor and say, hey, I'm in a job that sucks everything out of me. Am I okay? And there are, 3 or 4 inventories. It might take 3 sessions. And there's times, Dick, that I have had counselors say, hey, man, you're doing great. Just keep doing what you're doing. The second thing is sometimes they've said, man, you're starting to stray in this area. Do this, this, and this. So I think making sure you're doing what I call an emotional checkup. I would say the second thing is to understand that relationships are something that we have to initiate. And the problem, they're so valuable. We talked about how valuable they are. But the problem is you got to have them before you need them. When you're experiencing burnout, when you're on the verge of a marital affair, when you're on the verge of suicidal thoughts, boy, if you're not careful, it could be too late to get the traction in those kind of relationships. So find people you trust and reach out to them. I'm a big proponent of peers, Dick, peer relationships, ministers to ministers, because we have so much traction our very first meeting. I'll be in an airport, I'll meet another minister. And a few months ago, I almost missed my plane. We just got into a conversation. There was immediate traction. We had so much in common. And so I would say those things are the way to go and reach out. I think the third thing is I would say all of us are usually part of some kind of ministerial organization, crediting agency. When you think you're too good for that, when you think you're bigger than the organization, boy, you got a problem. So those organizations provide meetings and conventions, and go to those things, man. Even if it's hard for you, be the guy that can walk in the room and have emotional courage and sit down to people you don't know and get to know them.
Yeah, no, that is so good. Gene, this has been so valuable. If you're going to give the men and women watching this a parting shot, what is the thing you'd want to say to them to give them some sense of encouragement that there is light at the end of the tunnel? They don't have to live in isolation. What would you say?
I would say that I think the Holy Spirit, no matter how hard ministry is, no matter how much culture strays, God always gives us what we need. This is the greatest opportunity for the church. It's the greatest opportunity for ministers. So rise above that. Don't be a thermometer reflecting culture. Be a thermostat that is setting the atmosphere around you.
Yeah, no, that is so good. That is so good. Gene Roncone, thank you very much for your help. This has been great content. We applaud what you're doing there in Colorado and Utah. And to our viewers, if you have any questions or comments, be sure to send them to us. Email support@Leaders.Church. And if we need to get something to Gene, we'll do that. And I know he'll stand ready to be of whatever help he can be to you. We'll try to get you some additional resources in terms of counseling options and so on. So stay tuned for that in the show notes. But thank you again, Gene. If you have any need just in your leadership of the church, we stand ready. Jonathan Hardy and Dick Hardy stand ready with Leaders.Church and Church University to help you in any way we can. You can go to Leaders.Church or churchuniversity.com, and we'll be glad to serve you in that way. In the meantime, thanks so much for slicing some time off for us today. Thank you again, Gene. Make it a great day and be blessed.
Hey, Jonathan here, real quick before you go. Everything in your ministry rises and falls on your leadership.
Awesome,
so investing in your leadership is essential to staying healthy and growing the ministry. And that's why I want to invite you to join us inside the Leaders.Church membership. This online streaming service for pastors gives you access to more than 300 videos plus training material to level up your leadership and improve your ministry skills. If you'd like to do that, I want to invite you to go to Leaders.Church/boost. Again, that's Leaders.Church/boost. Well, thanks again for joining us on the Church Tips Podcast. We'll look forward to seeing you next time.